Have you achieved success and a high income, but still lack personal fulfillment and work-life balance? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Successful But Struggling podcast. Join us as Aaron, Unicia, Joanne, and Mim share transformative insights and practical strategies just for you. Discover real stories and lessons that will elevate your personal satisfaction, professional accomplishment, and financial empowerment.
Welcome to another episode of Successful But Struggling. Today you're in for a treat because we've got the four of us. You've got me, you've got Aaron, you've got Mim, you've got Joanne. And we're going to talk about a topic that frankly, it's very near and dear to all of our hearts, and I bet to you as well. The topic today is excellence versus professionalism. How exactly do we think about it? How is it sabotaging us in the long or in the short term? And what are some of the costs that frankly, I feel we could avoid if we just focus more on them? So without further ado, Mim, why don't you take us into, let's start a conversation with, how would you in your mind define excellence versus professionalism?
Unicia, it's such a great question because so many of the people that I work with, and I know that you do as well, they make excellence, they want to make it a way of life, and they do make it a way of life. It's a key priority for them. So many people say, I am striving to be the very best I can be. And it is such a sneaky thing that it can cross the line over into perfectionism. And what we know about excellence versus perfectionism is that excellence, it is something healthy. It is something that it's about being dedicated to preparation. It's about being dedicated to practice and putting in the reps. It's about bringing your full attention and your focus and your abilities in the moment, just bringing the very best of you. So you're striving to those high standards. You have high standards. And yet with excellence, you understand that there is always an inherent possibility of making mistakes. And you treat those as learning. And that's not what the perfectionist does. Whereas the perfectionist is going to say, I'm rigid about my excellence. I am relentless about my excellence. And that is not really excellence anymore, is it? Because it's so unrealistic. It's perfectionism. It's perfect or nothing. There's really no room for error with it. And I would say, Unicia, if I was to boil down one of the most important things that people don't typically think about is the relationship between excellence, or in this case, perfectionism, and identity. Because if you're someone who can stay in that excellence zone, you have an identity that says, I bring excellence within reason. And if you're in the perfection zone, you say, I bring excellence and I don't feel worthwhile unless I do it perfectly. So there's that fear of failure. And you feel like if you're not doing it perfectly, then you failed and you wonder, now, who am I anyway? So it can actually go pretty deep.
You know, I think it does. And you're so right, Mim, on that. And I love the fact that you talked about the rigidity and perfectionism, because when I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about it from our standpoint, right? Who are we as individuals when we're thinking about these things? But also, what is it that we expect from others that we work with? And that's something that I'm happy to touch base on, a little bit later maybe. But you're right in terms of there's such a difference between truly striving for excellence and being okay with it not necessarily being perfect, or you not being perfect, or individually, right? Versus, as you're listening to this, if it's your way or the highway, that's probably the ultimate definition, as Mim said, of being a perfectionist. Aaron, we were talking just about before the show about the cost of being either striving for that excellence or striving for the perfectionism. What have you seen with your clients as you've worked with so many individuals as part of your program, and the cost associated with one versus the other?
There can be such a high cost of perfectionism. And I wanted to share an example of clients that I've worked with. And one is really stuck on perfectionism and has some other kind of focus issues, distractibility that have those, plus perfectionism can be a bit of a disaster trying to get work done efficiently. And what I noticed is that when individuals get stuck in perfectionism, for example, I recommend people when they're completing their charts, I do a lot of coaching for physicians and healthcare providers, transitioning from perfectly punctuated paragraphs in their chart notes that would get an A+ on an English assignment. Let's trade that in for bullet points. Who cares if there's a period at the end of the sentence? It doesn't have to be a complete sentence. And the difference between one individual who made that pivot almost immediately when I made that suggestion, from the perfectly written chart note to one that really did the job in a more succinct manner without the perfect sentences. And they freed up so much of their time letting go of the perfectionism and also being willing to trust the new strategies that I was sharing, even though they may not have gotten them right. Their old way was the comfortable way. They'd been doing it for years, and it was costing them hours every day that they couldn't spend with themselves or their families. So when that individual embraced, I'm going to give it a try. I may not get it perfect. I do want my notes and my patient care to be excellent. In about 2 weeks' time, or maybe even less, that individual who let go of their perfectionism, but kept high quality patient care and high quality, excellent notes at the forefront, they freed up between 15 and 20 hours per week of uncompensated time. It was amazing. Contrast that to another client who went fully through my workshop and my 4-week course on charting more efficiently, and they could not let go of that perfectionistic trait that they have. They couldn't let go and try these new things because they weren't getting it perfect, and they're still struggling. And my advice to them is, okay, you can get there. You may need some more time and expertise, more one-on-one coaching, more group coaching. It may take you longer to break free of that habit. But do you think that other person who's hanging on to that perfection, it's costing them 15 to 20 hours per week? Is it really worth it? And if you ask the other person who's got that time back, I said, you ever going to go back to your old ways of charting? And they were like, absolutely not. Who would do that? When they now have this freedom that they have an entire weekend free, their evenings free, holidays free. They won't have to chart on vacations anymore. And that had been their norm for probably over a decade. And they let go of perfectionism, continued with excellence, and got huge results in a gift back to themselves.
You know, it's funny because you were talking that's so powerful, Erin. I couldn't help but do the numbers on this one. You guys know me. So based on the 15 to 20 hours, if we just were to take a simple 52 weeks, that's an average savings of 780 to 1,040 hours. That's only if those individuals, in this case with charting, were to save on how they do things. That's like saying work half the time, basically.
And on average, physicians are spending over 9 hours a week charting after hours, and that time for the majority of people is not compensated. So when I do simple math, even if they're earning a measly, $100 an hour, and you multiply, not including vacation time, I estimate it's at least $40,000 in savings when they can get rid of that 9 hours per week and incorporate the charting into their workday, do it in real time. And I estimate I probably gave away over $1 million in uncompensated time during my 25-year career. I wish I had my course back when I started practicing, because I could have gotten things done much more efficiently and really saved. It cost me a lot, really not letting go of that perfectionism.
That is really so impactful. So impactful. So if you're listening and the whole idea is, well, what could I be doing with that time? Here's the deal. If you're so inclined to want to work that additional time, at least go make more money. But if you want to gain your time back and have a lifestyle, then clearly there's a way you can go about that. Joanne, talk us a little bit about what about it from a mental health? Because this just, the idea of, in my case, as I'm sitting here talking about, well, if you want to work more, then go work more. That automatically drives right straight into the mindset, right? You have all this additional time. What are you going to do with that? How do you think about excellence versus professionalism from a mental and psychological standpoint?
Yes, what a wonderful question. And my brain is spinning listening to Erin talk, as just recently I've been building a new program for physicians as well, a new coaching program. And one of the pillars is actually how to redefine success. And that came to mind because if you're listening, you are probably someone, if you're being successful and you're struggling, you might be maybe dealing with some of the issues from perfectionism. And I say define success because we define our sense of self so much through, if you're a physician, if how many patients you see, what's the evaluations you're getting from the patients, what are your roles, what are the accolades, the house, the cars. And not that those things are not important, but eventually, if you start feeling that low sense of fulfillment and joy, it could be because it's what we're just talking about, the cost of this perfectionism, the cost of having these external things lead how we feel and how we're living our lives. And it's also in the seasons of our lives. And then if we take it another step forward, answering your question, there is a cost in terms of our overall well-being, our overall health, and of course, mental and emotional health. So we can easily see how getting stuck in perfectionism can lead to that stress, overwhelm, and burnout. Because it sounds really good to get stuck in doing something really, really well. This is what I hear from my clients, especially those who are physicians. But if it's to the cost of you taking care of yourself, of you spending time with your family, we can see it's a recipe for disaster. And that's just that stress, overwhelm, and burnout. Then there's also, I think we've all experienced this, the procrastination. Sometimes then when we get stuck in that, it has to be this way, the rigidity that we talked about earlier, then we don't move. And then what good does it give you? And then think of all the things that you miss out on. And then taking it a little bit deeper, of course, it will affect your sense of self. Is what Mim was saying before. When we're stuck in that black and white perfectionism, it has to be this way or not. And how does it affect your identity? If you define yourself based on this success of this perfection versus I might have not done it in this super perfect way, but I'm learning, I'm growing. And you can see how it can affect your self-esteem and your worth. And then again, we can also talk about, you could see how this could lead to over worrying, anxiety, and even depression if it starts affecting you internally. So it is a serious thing. We talk about this like we're talking about what shoes to buy, but it's so important when you think about it deeper in the way that we're all sharing here, and even listening to Erin's examples of how it can definitely get in our way versus when we strive for excellence, that then where it's that growth, that openness, and still have it be really good. I think those of us who are really successful, we struggle because these things start getting in the way. So just pay attention to it and think about it.
I totally agree. And actually, as a matter of fact, I was interviewed on a podcast earlier today, and the conversations came up specifically on how do we define business ownership versus entrepreneurs, and we were looking at kind of how the two juxtapose themselves. And a big consideration between the two is that a business owner is all about being in the business. The business entrepreneur is the person that is willing and able, and their mindset is prime to trust their team, to get out of the business and let those that are very much capable of being in the business and supporting the business actually drive that forward. And that can honestly, I see that oftentimes in our day-to-day life. And I want to talk just about a little bit about how that sabotaging happens. Kind of what are the costs if we were to think about it from a financial perspective. But Mim, you didn't really share from your standpoint, what do you see this difference between excellence and perfectionism when it comes to individuals climbing through the corporate ladder and frankly ascending in the upper and upper positions?
Oh, well, yes, Eunice, and I gotta say, you basically nailed it when you talked about business owners versus entrepreneurs. If you can't trust your team, and I say to leaders I work with all the time, if you're struggling with delegation, then your career peaks here. You're not going to grow in a leadership role, because that is the key. You become the bottleneck if you cannot trust other people. And so if you're a leader and you're a growing leader and you're moving through the executive ranks, And you cannot do what Erin pointed out, that her client who could not let go, went through the whole course and could not let go. That's a choice. And when you make that choice, as you're growing in those executive ranks, you're not going to grow. You're not going to go anywhere. And in fact, you're going to have your top talent quit on you because you're the bottleneck. They're frustrated. They're not being trusted. In my first corporate job, my boss said, and she said to the whole team, and I took it to heart because I come from a family of perfectionists. And so this is something that is near and dear to my heart. And I remember she said, I'm in my early 20s, and it wasn't even in a corporate, she said this in a corporate context, but she said in general, she said, you know what? Perfectionists don't get their books published. Perfectionists don't get their books published. So just like Erin's client who has to write the complete sentences and they have to put the period on the end, you've basically capped your growth. And if you're someone who wants to continue your success and only grow your success, that's gonna get you in trouble. I have clients, to your point, Eunice, about the impact. I have client companies that their company, it's in the drinking water practically. The whole company, they over-engineer everything. They over-engineer. And so they actually lose business because they have some customers who say, we don't want that much and you're charging us this much for all of that work. We don't want something that complex. Just keep it simple. Make it excellence, but keep it simple.
I wanted to say about something you mentioned, Mim, was so powerful about the ability to delegate. And I know, for example, even, we can shift from talking about businesses to our home life. For those of us with families and partners and kids, there was always this ongoing discussion about how are you supposed to load the dishwasher? And if I can only accept my way of loading the dishwasher, and it takes 5 to 10 minutes, and I can only accept the dishes put away my way with the forks all lined up straight and going into the right places, each of those 5 to 10 or 15-minute jobs is something that I could really be doing something better for my family and for myself if I were to delegate and allow some compromise and accept the way that other family members are going to do that job. And this spills over into our workplace as well. And when we think, but it's just 5 to 10 minutes, it's actually, as Eunice was doing the math, what is that costing you in a year and in a decade and in a lifetime? And it is way too much. When we let go of that perfectionistic, it has to be done my way, and we say, let's get curious, what's another way that might work for me and for you? We can delegate so much more to our teams and our family teams. And when we're feeling overburdened and overwhelmed and exhausted, even decreasing your burden by 1%, 2%, 5%, and you keep chipping away at it, that's going to make a huge difference if you're consistently letting go of that perfectionism and leaning into delegation with excellence. And then actually you're not, your team knows, if it's not perfect your way, we can do it my way, or maybe with a twist, we communicate with it. It also helps your team members feel successful and not always under scrutiny or as a failure as well.
Erin, funny question. Were you part of my husband and I conversation specifically on how to load a dishwasher, or is that not just a problem in our household?
No, I actually adopted my husband's way, which is you don't rinse the dishes hardly at all. You take big food particles off, you put them straight in, and the dishes get clean. The way the bowls are reloaded, it's 99% my husband's way. I do a little overcrowding and that's it.
It's funny because for us, it was different. It was always, I had to do all this and all of that. And I finally got to the point where I said to my husband, to your point about the 5 to 7 minutes, I said, listen, the way that I do it saves me time. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to honor what you want because you don't want the dishes touching. God forbid that they break. So I'm going to leave extra space. But if I ever see you going behind me, they're all yours, buddy.
This is like a relationship conversation, right? Of like relationship tips. This is a little tangent.
We could have a whole episode on how you get family chores done in families that are bigger than one, right?
Exactly. But going back to what you were saying, Erin and Mim earlier about perfectionism versus not, I was talking to someone and they came from a family of academic parents, and They said, listen, those that are perfectionists, they fit in a square box. They're going to fit somewhere, somehow, because they're okay. They're okay being confined and being in a box. Whereas people that are leaders, oftentimes they do not want to be in a box. And I don't know if you've ever seen the children that are constantly coloring as children outside of the lines. And then later on, if we were to follow them, they become the biggest leaders. Is the same thing between perfectionism and in my mind, that excellence. And when I think about it, kind of going to the question of the cost and how do we sabotage our success? For me, what I see a lot happening with, of course, our clients on the wealth strategy consulting side is all too often we have individuals come to us and they'll say, I can do it on my own. I've always done it on my own. So of course I'm going to be okay doing it on my own. Or guess what? I love what you said. I'm going to take what you said and I'm going to take it to the team that I've been working with for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, however long. And I'm going to ask them some of those questions and see if they can do it for me. Because now we're meeting it goes back to the mindset and the resistance against, hey, I could be doing things my way, maybe thinking that we're saving, but in reality, what ends up happening is it's costing those individuals for our type of client at a lowest level, hundreds of thousands of dollars over their lifetimes. For most of our clients, it's millions. And please hear me, when I say millions, I mean millions. So then my challenge to individuals that are so kind of, I don't want to call them stuck, but as you're feeling yourself saying, you know what, maybe I'll just figure it out or I'll get help from, think of it from, I say this often, if you're going to a well and you're expecting they're going to get a dry well, to be more specific, a dry well, and you're expecting they're going to get a fresh body of water coming to help quench your thirst, is that going to happen? The answer is no. So if we've got a problem and we fit in this perfectionism box, and it's all about what we know or only the people that maybe we think can help us, what are we doing? When you've heard of Erin talking about how she's changing the world that physicians chart, we're talking about tens of hours per week. You've heard Joanne, you've heard Mim, and I can tell you for our clients from a financial standpoint, huge. The cost is absolutely huge. So in my mind, how do we then juxtapose it and take that desire to constantly go towards perfectionism and strive for that excellence is by first and foremost thinking with an open mind and wanting to understand what are leading practices. Not being stuck in what we historically might have said, oh, but I think this is the best because I learned it or somebody told me, but constantly asking the question of what am I missing out on? Or rather, if you're more of the cup is half full versus half empty, what more could I be adding to the situation? How could I make this better? And then the other thing is to allow yourself to think outside of the box and to realize that it's not about the strategy. It's not about the one trick pony. It's about the whole picture. But that also, and Joanne, you talked about this earlier, it involves a certain level of being okay to be uncomfortable in order to gain that success. So just like we were talking about you can fit in the box or you can be like the child leader that draws outside of the lines. Allow yourself, maybe you don't want to draw outside of the lines, but who are the people that you're working with that are drawing outside of the lines, whether it be with your finances, whether it be with your mindset, whether it be with your life coaching, whether it be with somebody that's helping you on the leadership side. Who are those people that are in your life that are helping you get outside of the box and think with a different perspective?
I'm hearing so much about mindset, Eunicia. I really like that. It really is. I love that open mind. It takes a choice. And I just go back to Erin's client who clearly has made a choice one direction. And boy, it has consequences. Our choices have consequences. Joanne, you talked about black and white thinking, that open-mindedness, that willingness for black and white thinking. One way that I see this show up is I need all the information before I move forward and make a decision. And that's a form of perfectionism. And I know that in the Marine Corps, they have something they call the 70% solution. And the 70% solution says, and this is with high stakes, this is with people's lives on the line. And the 70% solution is if you have 70% of the information, if you have 70% of the resources you need, if you have 70% or more of confidence in your plan, then it's time to go forward. It's time to go forward and then to course adjust as needed. And that idea of course adjust is something that I don't think perfectionists have as much in their mind and in their vocabulary, but that's part of the process.
This is such an important topic. I am so glad that we're bringing it up because it's something that we all hear. It sounds like we've all been exposed individually, personally, and with the people that we work with, in how it sounds like a great idea being perfectionism, like that's a high standard, but we've just heard how it's not, how it's rigid, it doesn't leave any room for growth. And it's like Tony Robbins says, it is the lowest standard for us to have for ourselves because it is unattainable. So listen to that. And versus excellence, which is right, like we're saying, that mindset, like you're saying, Mim, of growth. I can even open my arms of growth and openness and learning. And that's where we need to focus on and remember. And I talk a lot about that. And I joke that because I work with so many physicians in coaching, that you can't say to a doctor, done is better than perfect, or B minus work rules the world, because it's true. Like I joke that you can't go to the surgeon and have it say, I'm not sure if I have to cut here or there, but I don't want to be perfect. And I joke, but not funny, because there are times that you want to be very precise. And I challenge the people I coach to think of precision versus perfection, because I get challenged of, well, how can I not be perfect? I have to be perfect. And again, it's sometimes a play in words that allows space for growth. And then know that it might be necessary in the operating table, but you can turn it off later in your life. And I love how we started with definitions, because that's another challenge. We have to define these concepts to understand. Sometimes those pre-programmed definitions have been given to us by someone else, and we believe them as facts, like, oh, I'm supposed to be perfect. And we already heard the consequences that we talked about, right? Like Erin talked about the consequences in terms of time. Imagine time, how much that's taken away from you, your health, your family. We heard from Eunice, right, of talking how it could literally cost you money and you get stuck, and then you expect like you're going to have all this wealth and it doesn't come. And sometimes you have to get out of your own box and have a team like Onice's team, and trust them to know that you don't just check off boxes. You have to have that openness of the excellence and have a team that would understand your precise situation to help you, rather than the perfect way, which we know it doesn't work. And then we also heard from Mim how, even though it seems like a high standard, how people with this perfectionism tendencies, they don't move forward. They don't excel. They don't really, right? Like she said, they don't publish their books. And, you can use that analogy, and the importance of delegation and curiosity. And I have so many notes. I don't want to just repeat everything, but I just want to leave us all with a positive note. Let's embrace imperfection. That's where we find growth. That's where we learn, right? That's all that we're here about. And celebrate your wins. And be curious also about the journey of the failures, and how much you were exactly where you are has to do with your failures before. And I had to add, because I love it, thank you, Anicia, of let's all color outside the line. I just love that. I think that we have to give ourselves that. And again, if you want to hear some more, if you want to connect with us individually, if you want to see more information, visit us on our website, successfulbutstruggling.com, and stay tuned for our next episode that's coming right away.
Don't miss out on more strategies that will elevate you to new heights. Visit successfulbutstruggling.com now, where you'll discover exclusive resources and the opportunity to connect with each of us individually. There you can dive deeper into how you, too, can take your personal and professional game to the next level. And if you're serious about optimizing your results, take 2 quick steps now. Number 1, connect with us on the website. And number 2, tune in to the next episode.